following are three fascinating true reincarnation stories. Jeremy Anderson, James Hauser. Jeremy was born in Mokomus, Oklahoma, and at the age of 2 insisted that his name was not Jeremy but Jimmy. One day he was looking at a picture book with his grandmother and saw a picture of a truck and said to her that it was a truck just like that in the picture that struck him and killed him. His grandmother said that Jeremy was extremely angry with the truck driver that had killed him. On another occasion, his grandfather Jack was lying in bed and resting a sore back, and Jeremy walked into the room and said, "What's up, Grandpa? Is your back killing you?" His grandfather replied, "Well, it's not killing me, but it's very sore." Jeremy then said, "Well, one time my back was really sore and it killed me." In 1967, two teenagers by the name of Jimmy Hauser, 14, and Kevin Lucas, 16, were driving a Buick sedan. Kevin, the supposed driver, was driving at a speed of 75 miles an hour when their car struck a truck at a rural intersection. The car then skidded about 99 feet before striking another truck before spinning another 108 feet. Although Kevin Lucas survived the accident with serious injuries, he had no memory of the accident, and Jimmy had been killed. James Hauser, or Jimmy, was buried at Tonkawa Cemetery, about 90 miles from Jeremy's house. It turns out that Jimmy was the son of Nancy Anderson and the half-brother of Ron Anderson, who was Jeremy's father. James Anderson's gravestone reads August 11, 1952 to August 12, 1967. In April 1980, when Jeremy was 5 years old, he was taken to where the accident had taken place 13 years previously and got extremely emotional and described how he had fallen out of the car. He said, "I was going like a bullet. It went like a bomb." The undertaker, who had overseen the damaged body of Jimmy, had described the type of injury normally sustained by the driver of the car and not the passenger. Jeremy Anderson had always claimed that he was the driver of the car and not Kevin. Robin Klein, a Tibetan student. When Robin was just 5 years of age, his mother noticed him making strange sounds, and after a period of time, his speech became more fluent, and he continued to utter the same strange sounds. Because Robin had made the sound so often, his mother was eventually able to make out what his son was actually saying, and started to recognize them. One evening his parents were having a dinner party, and she discussed amongst the friends that her son regularly made strange sounds, as if they had meaning to him. One of the guests at the party offered to come into the nursery and listen to what his son was saying, and found that he was saying many strange-sounding names. The guest asked the mother whether she could come back with someone who was an expert in languages, and 1 week later returned with the professor. The professor sat with the young man for 1 hour and said to his mother that the language being spoken by his son appears to be a dialect that came from northern Tibet. He recognized a few others, but many he did not recognize at all. The professor asked his mother whether the family had ever visited that region or whether any of their friends had spoken the language around the child. His mother replied no to both questions, and they went back to the nursery. The professor then asked Robin where he had learned the foreign words, and he replied, "In school." His mother then said, "But Robin, you've never been to school." Robin then replied, "When I went to school before." The professor then asked Robin, "What did the school look like?" Robin thought for a moment and said, "In the mountains." But then said to his mother, "But not the sort of mountains we went to in summer." The professor then asked, "Was the school made of stone or wood?" And Robin said, "Well, of stone." He was then asked what the teachers were like, and were they men or women. He said they were men, but they didn't dress like you or Daddy. They had skirts with a sash around their waist that looked like a rope. Robin then gave a detailed description of the school he went to. The professor was so fascinated by what the young boy had told him that he decided to go to northern Tibet and seek out the school Robin had attended. He later wrote to the parents and said that the area the son had described was near China and was fairly accessible in eastern Tibet. He then said, "I have found the school your son described was in the Kwenlun Mountains, rocky and arid and nothing like the mountains you visit in summer." He said, "If you did Robin's description in detail, including the lamas who teach there." Dorothy Eady, Benshrit High Priestess. Dorothy Louise Eady was born in London in 1904, but at the age of 3, fell down a flight of stairs and seriously injured herself, where doctors initially declared her dead. However, she made an amazing recovery and then started exhibiting strange behaviors, and asked that she be brought home and started to speak in a foreign language. At Sunday school, she started comparing Christianity with the ancient Egyptian religion and was expelled from Atholet's girls' school after she refused to sing a hymn calling on God to curse Egyptians. One day, her parents took her to the British Museum and, whilst looking at a photograph from one of the exhibit rooms, cried out, "There is my home, but where are the trees and the gardens?" What Dorothy was observing was a temple of Seti I, the second pharaoh of the 19th dynasty of Egypt, around 1290 BC. She then ran about the halls of the Egyptian rooms, kissing the statue's feet. After the first trip, she would regularly visit the British Museum, where she met a man by the name of E.A. Wallace Budge, who encouraged her in the study of hieroglyphs. After leaving school at 16, Edie became a part-time student at Plymouth Art School and began to collect Egyptian antiquities. In 1931, she moved to Egypt, and on arriving, she kissed the ground and announced she'd come home to stay. She married a teacher of English by the name of Iman Abdel McGuid. She would later report nighttime visitations by an apparition of Hall Ra, who told her of her previous life as a young woman in ancient Egypt called Bentrishit, who had reincarnated in the person of Dorothy Edie. Bentrishit's mother sold vegetables and her father was a soldier during the reign of Seti I between 1290 BC to 1279 BC. At the age of 3, her mother died and she was sent to the temple of Kom El Sultan and was brought up to be a priestess. One day, Seti I visited her where they became lovers, and when she became pregnant, she told the high priest who the father was. The high priest told her she'd committed a serious offense where she committed suicide rather than face trial. In 1935, and 2 years after her marriage ended to Iman Abdul McGuin, Dorothy went to live in Nazlat al-Saman, near the Giza pyramids, and met archaeologist Salim Hassan of the Department of Antiquities. He employed her as a secretary and draftswoman and was the department's first female employee to Hassan and became valuable to other Egyptian scholars. Under her own name, she wrote articles and books and befriended many of the famous Egyptologists of the era. During this time, she prayed and made frequent offerings to the gods of ancient Egypt, would often spend the night in the Great Pyramid. On the 3rd of March 1956, aged 52, she moved to Arabat, Abydos, where she was given the name Seti and made regular visits to the Temple of Seti and had shown advanced knowledge of the temple. The chief inspector from the Antiquities Department decided to test her knowledge and asked her to stand at particular wall paintings in complete darkness, where she was instructed to identify them based on her prior knowledge as a temple priestess. She completed the task successfully, even though the painting locations had not yet been published at the time. For Dorothy, the Temple of Seti was a place of peace and security and felt watched over by the ancient Egyptian gods. Dorothy Edie, or Seti as she was now known, claimed that in her past life as Bentrishit, the temple had a garden where she first met Seti I. These were the same gardens that she described as a young girl living in London that were not believed by her parents. While she was living in Abydos, the gardens she described in her previous life as a temple priestess were discovered by excavators, and the garden matched her descriptions. Dorothy turned one of the temple rooms into a personal office and described the Temple Seti as like entering a time machine where the past becomes the present and the modern mind has difficulty understanding a world in which magic is accepted. Dorothy wrote and detailed many modern practices from ancient times in short articles written between 1969 and 1975 and were edited and published. At the age of 60 in 1964, she began work as a part-time consultant for the Antiquities Department, guiding tourists around the Temple of Seti and explaining the symbolism of the painted wall scenes. On the 21st of April 1981, Dorothy Edie, or Seti, died in Abydos and was buried in an unmarked